Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
Learning to be humble was really hard because I had a big ego and I thought I was the tough girl. And, I grew up street fighting and was angry, very angry all the time. And so thinking that was, I guess you could say power, but then you realize that's not power, letting go of power is actually very powerful. And listening and being humble and just, again, doing what you're supposed to and just sit down and do it. Don't get involved in everything else. It's you have a list of things that you need to do today and you need to keep busy because your mind will go elsewhere, and so
Right.
schedule, learning to work a dead end job. I worked at Jamba Juice and I was I remember getting my first check and I was I could literally make this in 3 minutes. And I spent freaking 80 hours to make this, because I was so used to such a fast lifestyle and money coming in quick and easy and you really don't have to work for it. Not that I wasn't a hard worker, because I will say I always was driven and worked hard, but to be humbled completely of oh my God, this is what it's like, to live a normal life, and to work for what you have and to then you appreciate it more, and you're okay, I can do this.
Mhm.
They've done it and they're happy and they're living a good life and they have 1 and 2 years, which was mind blowing to even think 60 days sober. When I first got sober was how did they do that?
Mhm.
That's impossible, in a year, I couldn't even think about that. A year of sobriety, nothing, completely nothing. I was just that doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
me. It's
Well,
almost
that's why they teach you one step at a time, one day at a
like,
time, 1 hour at a time, right? It's
yeah,
like it's like because you can't imagine it, because
yes,
you've never lived it,
yeah,
right? It's like you just gotta put one foot in front of the other. You just gotta keep making progress, even if it's just a little bit a day.
absolutely.
So yeah, that's wild. So so going through this and being stubborn,
Mhm.
right? That had to have been a real challenge when they said, just put your head down and do what you're told. Like,
Oh,
what?
yeah,
I don't think so, right? It's
definitely.
not how I'm wired, you
Yeah,
know? But it's probably the best thing you could have ever done for yourself, right?
absolutely.
Because it taught you a ton,
Hmm.
right? There's a place for stubbornness and there's a place for humility. It's kinda
Hmm.
like the seasons thing, right? There's a
Yeah,
season for right? It's kinda like, um, and that's an interesting skill that you have to learn at some point, and it's a big part of growing up, right? It's a
it is.
big part of maturing and all that kinda thing. Um, yeah, that's wild. That is quite an experience that you went through. So you finish with this 45 days of this program. Where do you go from there?
Um, so I ended up staying a tad bit longer based on my insurance. And then my caseworker came to me and she was like, "What's your plan?" And again, my plan was still to come home and, when I was done with treatment. And she was like, "What if I could offer you basically your rent paid for free? And now you go to outpatient, right? So you only have to go to group twice a week. You
Mhm.
still have certain things within that house you have to do, you have chores and you have to go to meetings and stuff like that. But you're doing less groups. And you have the ability to kind of have more freedom and they would pay for your rent while you got on your feet." And she was like, "Would you be interested in that?" And I thought about it and I was like, "Well, let me think about it." And then after I thought about it for about 24 hours, I was like, if I go home, I'm going to end up the exact same. I'm
Yeah.
good. I have nothing to go back to. At the time, I
Yeah.
didn't have kids. I mean, no relationship. There's nothing back there other than my family, but most of them were, out anyways. And so, at this
And
point,
there's that crowd,
and there's that crowd,
right? You're like, yeah. Yeah, right.
Exactly. The same association, the same stuff I would have went back to.
Yeah.
And so I told her, I was like, okay, like I'm in. And so then they moved me to another house, which was like almost beachfront in San Clemente. And it was like kind of small, but all of us girls had grew a relationship. And so we kind of all worked together. And during intensive outpatient, they used to have gym time in the mornings. And so someone would pick you up and take you to the gym. And what I did for like a week is, instead of the gym, I would actually walk to the businesses around there to look for a job. And then that's how I landed Jamba Juice. And then, so when I got into outpatient, then I rode the bus to Jamba Juice every day. It was literally like an hour bus ride, about a mile walk to the bus. And then I would do that every day. But anyway, so then I go into outpatient, and then you have all these chores and things that you have to kind of uphold to. Then I was still going to meetings. I was working with a sponsor, who my sponsor ended up switching over time because my sponsor ended up relapsing, first one. And so the one I wanted originally, it was kind of a conflict because she was my group facilitator when I was in intensive outpatient. And then that time I was in outpatient. So I asked her, like, hey, can you help me? Because I was on a certain step. I don't know if you know anything about the steps, but there's one where you go through your inventory and then you have to tell somebody everything, like it takes hours and hours to get through, of like your deepest, darkest secrets you would never tell anybody, kind of thing. And I was like, can you help me on this step? And then after that step, I was like, can you just be my sponsor? And she's like, yeah, it's fine, So anyways, but yeah, so
well, after you told her all your deepest, darkest secrets, right?
Yeah.
It was sort of
It's like, okay, we're locked in now.
Yeah, you're kind of qualified now, right?
Into this. So I just continued to work, and I rode the bus for like 6 months. Once I hit 6 months of sobriety, me and two other girls, they came to us and they were basically told us like we had 48 hours to get out. And they said our insurance had ran up. Normally a situation like that, obviously I would have went out and like used. But at this point, I had enough sobriety where I was like, all right, well, let's figure out something. So all of us girls knuckled down and we're like, okay, let's find a 2-bedroom. And then one of the girls had a boyfriend, and I was like, we'll all 4 live there and we'll just share the rent. Obviously, none of us were making good money.
Right.
So we found a place in literally that day that they kicked us out. We went and looked at a bunch of places, found a place that would take our income. And then I couldn't be on the lease because I forgot why. Oh, I had like a prior like eviction or something like that back when I was obviously using. And so me and her boyfriend couldn't be on the lease, but they trusted us and were like, okay, like, let's move into this place. So at 6 months of sobriety, got my first place with them. So it's all 4 of us living in it. Me and my roommate who shared a room, we had blow up mattresses, like literally starting from the ground up. And then at 8 months sober is when I bought my car. So I the whole time was riding the bus, walking everywhere. And then at 8 months, I finally was able to buy a car.
What was that like?
It was so nice. Like I was so grateful because I'd been riding a bus for a long time, and you see all kinds of people on the bus, and it was so time consuming. It's like a mile walk, and then I got to sit there for an hour. It was a lot of time out of my day. And so I always vowed, I'm like, if someone is trying to build their life and they need a ride, like I will always give them a ride, because I know, like I had so many people, I had a really good support group, like other group facilitators that would give me rides to work because they knew like, I was just had my head down and doing what I was supposed to, because a lot of other people obviously weren't, because they're like, out of me and 100 people that were in rehab at the same time, only 3 of us stayed sober. Me and 2 other people.
Wow.
Out of 100 people. And that's how low the odds were. I'll never forget, I was in a room and my group facilitator at the time, who became my sponsor, her name is Karen. And she goes, that, and this is honestly, I feel like probably off because I feel like it's actually lower than this, but she goes, 1 out of 10 of you will stay sober. And there was like 20 of us in a room. She was like, only 2 of you will stay sober. And I said inside, like, well, it's gonna be me. Like, I'm not gonna be like everybody else and lose everything all over again that I worked so hard for, because it was a lot of work,
Mhm.
a lot of therapy, a lot of meetings, a lot of groups, and just like trying to rebuild.
That's where that stubbornness comes in.
Yes, definitely. It's
As much as that stubbornness was your downfall, it
Mhm.
was also the thing that dug you out.
Yeah, my mom used to say, Regina, use your powers for good.
Yeah.
She would always tell me that. I tell my daughter that now too, use that stubbornness for good. Like, don't let it hurt you, because it will,
Yeah. It can if you let it. Yeah.
hard head makes a soft ass. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
That's it. All right. So you lease a place,
Yep.
you buy your first car.
Hmm.
Now you have freedom, right?
Yep.
Where do you go from there?
From there, after 8 months, I met my daughter's father. He was a patient. So, okay, so let me rewind a little bit.
Mhm.
At 6 months of sober, when they kicked me out, they also offered me a job. And so
Oh,
we would like you to be a driver here at this facility, because they knew I was serious and I was, pretty routined and like scheduled and on top of it. And so they offered me a job. And so obviously I accepted it, was finally making more money. I mean, not anything crazy, but making way more than I was at Jamba Juice.
mhm.
At first I was maintaining both, and then I ended up dropping Jamba Juice. But
Right.
anyway, so I started there, and then I met her dad, my daughter's dad, and he was at the treatment facility I was working at. Well, we were just obviously, like, I would see him at meetings. We didn't like hang out then. So we would kind of talk. And then I left that treatment center. I got a better job offer at a detox center, where I would then be like a lead as far as like admin work and getting patients in and documentation,
Mhm.
stuff like that. So I took that job offer, and then we started hanging out. So it's starting to kind of grow in the corporate world, if you will. And when I met him, we, maybe TMI, but we had a night stand and I got pregnant. So I was still very new. Obviously, I only had a year sober when I got pregnant. So trying to then learn how to stay sober. Now I'm freaking pregnant with these crazy ass hormones.
Mhm.
And I'm like, I don't ever even get depressed. I was depressed. I didn't want a kid. But I couldn't stomach getting an abortion. I don't care if people do it. Like, I get it. But I just couldn't. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, now I'm stuck. I'm stuck with this
Mhm.
guy, and I'm just stuck with this kid. And so I didn't really have a connection during pregnancy. And I felt really, really alone, because, most of the girls that I knew were just new in rehab. Nobody really had kids. And most that did have kids, their kids were taken because of their drug use.
Yeah.
So right at a year, when I found out I was pregnant, two of my roommates relapsed.
Mm.
I had a feeling they did, because their eyes were pinned. They were getting sneaky in their bedroom. They always had it locked. It was just like really weird.
Mhm.
We confronted them, me and my roommate who shared a room, and we tried to kick them out. We tried to change the locks. They wouldn't do it. So I got, in the interim, got blessed that my name was not on the lease, because I was able to walk away. And so I was stressed, because I was like, I don't want to be living with people who are using heroin. It's literally right next door to me.
Right.
And so I get a text message, swear, like I get a text message like, hey, would you want to take on this house managing position? So when you do a house manager position, how it works is you live in the house,
Mhm.
people that are doing outpatient or sober living.
Mhm.
You're responsible to make sure they're doing their chores, they're going to meetings, like things like that. But
Mhm.
trade, you get rent free
Mhm.
to pay to live there. And he asked me if I'd be interested. And obviously, I was like, yes, please, like whatever. And so
Mhm.
my roommate, she ended up getting in a situation. I think she ended up getting a place or something, but I made sure she was good. And then I moved out into this sober living that I was managing, which I had the craziest, psychoest girls ever. They were like, I would leave, I would come back. There'd be like guys running out of the house. Anyway, so I was trying to like manage my hormones while dealing with a bunch of chaotic women that I lived with. And so that was kind of like my next step of like, okay, learning how to stay sober, dealing with all these hormones. Like I was anemic, I was tired, I threw up the whole time. So I wasn't mentally in a good place, but I stayed sober. And I was like, I don't want to be like my sister's lost her kids, my brother has lost their kids, so most of my nieces and nephews I can't even see because they're in the system.
Mm.
And so I didn't want to be like that. So I didn't have a connection during pregnancy. Then once I had her, the moment that they put her on me, at first I was like, oh wow, this thing is mine, like this is weird. And then like immediately got that connection and I was like, I would kill anybody for this thing. And so I never had any postpartum or anything like that. I really only had like prepartum, if you will.
Right, right.
And then so then it was trying to learn because we moved in together. His name is Chris, her dad. We moved in together around, I was like literally 8 months pregnant. So
Mhm.
we lived together for that month. And then we didn't have any intimacy or anything like that. It was already like, I'm really not into you like that. We're just trying to like raise this kid together.
Mhm.
So it was kind of hard because we lived two different lifestyles. I was a firm believer in the program. I still went to NA and AA meetings. I still had a sponsor. I still worked my program. That was my support group. And he was doing like we both got promoted to supervisors, but we worked at two different like treatment facilities.
Mhm.
Just doing like shady things. We both had credit cards to our companies, and he would like buy himself personal lunches and like things like this that I just didn't agree with. We lived two different lifestyles. And then I knew he was going to end up using again. Because we would kind of argue about it. And I was like, the moment you have a sip of beer, like you're out. And he was like, just if I have a sip of beer. I was like, the thing is, you don't understand is that sip of beer is going to lead to you using again,
The gateway. It's a gateway. Yeah.
you know? And then right when she turned 1, he got fired from his job, obviously for doing the shady things, started catching up to him. And so I knew at that point it was probably going to happen. And it did. I woke up one morning and it was 4 a.m. and he was at this point sleeping on the couch. We had gotten in an argument and because she was my world. And he was like, basically it's me or her in the bed. And I'm like, well, there's the couch. Cause
Mhm.
I had her sleeping in the bed with me because I was breastfeeding. And I'm like, I don't
Mhm.
want to get up and do all this. Like I can literally just TMI, but pop a boob out and go back to sleep. It's just
Mhm.
here for me. And I
Mhm.
was terrified of having her in the crib anyways, because I had already lost a nephew that had died in the crib. So I was just
Mm.
too scared. But anyways, so I woke up to change her diaper and noticed he wasn't on the couch. It was 4 a.m. So I already knew. I'm like, he's out getting high. And his thing was meth, which is insanity to me. But anyways, so then later on that day, luckily my coworkers, my boss was so supportive of me because I devoted my whole life to working in treatment, and
Mhm.
I went above and beyond always, which is why I also got promoted so quickly. And they were very supportive of me. I had messaged her and was like, look, I think I need a peek up. I'm pretty sure Chris is out using. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with Aaliyah. And my boss was like, bring her here. I'll watch her for you tonight while you work. And so we had to do that for like weeks. And so he disappeared off and was getting high. And then, so I obviously needed to terminate the lease because I couldn't afford it anymore on my own. And he couldn't financially help anymore. And so, um, right when she turned 1, then we terminated the lease. His mom came out here to help me while I could find a daycare. My sponsor had a spare room in Oceanside. That's how I ended up in Oceanside because I was in Orange County at this time. She had a spare bedroom and was like, look, you can stay with me. You don't have to pay rent and just until you get on your feet. And so I found a daycare and then I moved in with my sponsor. So me and my daughter were sharing a bedroom at the time. And that was really hard. I didn't know if I was going to make it because obviously, as you know, living in California is so expensive. And I was like,
Mhm.
Mom, I don't know how I'm going to make it. And I got another promotion, got promoted to director. So I was making more money.
Mhm.
And so then it was like, okay, from here, I moved into another bedroom. Then it was too far. So I moved into another, just a bedroom. So me and my daughter have been sharing a bedroom for a long time. And then right around, I was 4 years there, director. So she was uh, two, almost two. And I, at the time, had been helping some friends train and
Mhm.
loved it. I'd already been certified, but I couldn't really like get paid for it because I was on call all the time. I worked like 80, 100-hour work weeks with being on call for this company because I mean, I'm sure as you know, like working in a detox facility is so high maintenance and everyone's like on the verge of death all the time or just
Mhm.
for crazy. So like there's just so much chaos all the time. So after like 4 years, I was pretty burnt out and I was just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but it's not gonna be this.
Yeah.
Give them like a 2 months notice. It was the first time I've ever quit a job and not had a job lined up.
Right.
I reversed back to helping like my friends and helping them get comfortable in the gym and then helping them with their nutrition because I had lost a lot of weight before I had my daughter and then lost a lot of weight afterwards. And then after I had her, I was working on building because I was too tiny and lost
Mhm.
weight. But anyway, so I was helping out my friends and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I loved training and helping like other people find their for fitness and lose weight or gain weight, whatever their dream is. So when I left that job, then I took on a job part-time training and then it just kind of grew from there. And so I was working kind of like multiple gigs at the time and a lot of hours and I loved training, but I had got promoted to operations manager at Crunch in Oceanside. I don't know if you've ever been there.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to, but they kind of tied my hands because my daughter was coming into the kids club. And then they finally were like, she can't come in here anymore, which didn't really make sense to me. But anyway, so they were like, but if you'll take this position, we'll pay you enough to compensate for a babysitter. So I kind of had to take the position, but I was still training some clients on the side because it was
Mhm.
hard to let go. Then the pandemic happened.
Yeah.
So I had actually stepped down a week before the pandemic happened. And I was just like, if you're telling me, because they told me basically, they were like, this is the last week. If we see you training another person,
Mm.
like we can't. I was like, okay, well, I'm actually going to step down because I just wanted to train clients. That's it. Like, I didn't want to be in a manager position. When the pandemic happened, I've been on the grind for a long time, like from
Mhm.
sobriety to like now trying to build a career. And then I'm a single mom. And for the first time, I could sit back and was like, I'm doing a lot, but I'm getting nowhere.
Mhm.
Um, and so I was like, okay, I took my clients private. Me and this other trainer started putting our clients together. And so we were training them everywhere. We were like going to the parks and the beaches, like wherever we could go, we were there. We were going to random people's garages. Like they didn't care. They just wanted to work out. And so did we.
Mhm.
And then after things started slowly coming back, then the gym was calling us to come back. And I told her, I was like, we should just open a gym because I knew
Mhm.
property would be cheap. And I was like, if we're going to open a business, now's the time. She had some other priorities, which is fine. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just do it myself then. So I ended up buying an apartment. I ended up renting an apartment. This is the first time like me and my daughter have been in an apartment on our own. We had
Mhm.
renting rooms for so long. So we finally had some space. It was still a one bedroom, but it was massive. So we both had our own room or our own bed, sorry. And it was our own place. And I wasn't even sure if I could afford it, to be honest. I just kind of jumped into it because it had a garage. And I was like, I
Mhm.
have to be stationary somewhere. So once we moved in, like I just was picking up clients left and right. Like my business was growing massively. And so I was like, okay, well, I think it's time. Like, I'm just going to stack some money. I'm going to do whatever I can to like open a gym. So I picked up a bartending job and I trained full time. And it took me a year to find property, a freaking year to find somewhere that had like permits, that like,
Mhm.
had parking and whatnot. Plus, like, for whatever reason, I guess because they were so busy, real estate agents weren't really answering the phone. So it was a weird time. But
Mhm.
so a year in, I finally find a building, which is next door to the one I have now because it's half the size. But I started off small with like 1,700 square foot. And because I got a lot of no's, and it was frustrating because as being a woman who's an entrepreneur, people don't take you as serious. You got to kind of prove, like, take me serious. Like, just somebody needs to give me a chance. And
Mhm.
somebody did, like, I was obviously a new startup. I'm not a franchise or anything. So, like, I'm starting from the ground up. And so finally, I signed this lease. It used to be called Dark Side Fitness. Apparently, it was like a pole dancing studio or whatever. So I get in, and I paint all the walls. I do the flooring. I did all the dirt. But luckily, like, I had friends. I would have random, like, customers I would meet at the bar and just tell them, like, this is my dream. This is what I want to do. They would just come and help. Like,
Mm.
telling everybody, like, this is what I want to do, and people just believed in it. And so I always had a really good support system, which was nice because obviously, like, working as long as I have and, like, being a single mom has just been probably the most difficult to balance, like, having time with your child, but also, like, your business has to be a number one priority. So it's like finding that balancing beam is very, very difficult. Um, yeah, so obviously I opened up during the pandemic, so it was a little bit of a challenge and it took a lot of growing. But I think overall I've just used the same tools that I did from sobriety. It's like, no matter, do what you're told, right? Like, I've gotten mentors, I've gotten advice from other people of, like, okay, I don't know it all. So
Mhm.
teacher, but remain student at all times because someone out there is doing better and bigger than you are. So you might
Mhm.
as well listen up because they know what they're doing. And at the
Mhm.
time, like, no one was building gyms. So I was just trying to take advice from other people who own businesses. But anyone who even owned a gym was just on their own road and was not trying to help at all. So I was just winging it. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I know I can find property, right? Like, and then I saved up like $40,000 in that year just from bartending and training. And I spent every single penny I had investing into the dream. And I was like, well, it's going to work out because I have no plan B. So I'm going to do, hey, you know,
Like burning the ships, right?
it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
if you be, then you're already like setting yourself up for failure, I believe, personally. But I was like, there's no backup plan. It's all in, like, if I had to go out on the corner and do what I had to do to make money for the rent, then that's what I got to do. Thank God I have never had to do that. So that's great. But yeah, it's been a journey. I mean, we expanded last September, so almost a year ago, into twice the size, and kind of was the same thing as, like, I don't even know if I can afford this, but I'm gonna figure it out. And
Mhm.
so as long as they say yes, I'll figure it out. And that's what I've been doing for the past
So
31.
how big's your facility now?
Now it's 3,500 square foot downstairs and it's 1,000 square foot upstairs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
So
4,500 square feet altogether.
yeah. And
And
so
where's it located in Oceanside?
it's right off South Coast Highway. It's 845 South Coast Highway. It's next to, like, Allen's Bicycle Shop, Oceana Laundry, 101 Cafe. So we're in the same building as, like, Allen's and Enterprise and stuff.
Gotcha. So since you started Stone Impact,
Hmm.
what's the number one most important thing you've learned?
I would say, man, there's like so many. It's hard to narrow it down to one. Uh,
Okay, how about the top three?
Consistency for one. What I see is, like, when people want to start a business, they're so gung ho for like the first few months, and then they get into it and they're like, man, this shit is hard. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, this is every day. Like,
Yeah.
right, this is every day you work on this.
Mhm.
That's number one, is consistency. Number two, I would say, is definitely, like, remaining teacher and student, is like being coachable. Because I have never built a business before in my life other than, like, illegal weird ones I had back in the day. But
Mhm.
so I don't know what I'm doing. And, like, there are other people that do know. Or
Mhm.
even if it's not in this field, it's still the same principle across
Yeah.
the, like, building one business is just like building the rest. And that's where it's consistency, hard work, but it's also strategy. So I would say strategy number three is, like, being smart, right? Like, what's the point of opening a business to sell your soul? Like, your goal is to have not an out, right? But something that works for you. Which
Mhm.
strategy in that plan. Um, but yeah, I would say that's probably the top three is like being coachable, remaining teacher and student, consistency, and being, strategizing about what your approach is to everything that you're doing.
Yeah, and hope's not a strategy, right?
Definitely not. Definitely hope all day, but nothing's going to change.
So if somebody's listening to this, and there are people that will, somebody's listening to this and they're thinking about starting their own business, what's the number one thing they should focus on?
A plan for one. So sitting down is like, if you want to open a business, what's your plan? Like you need, like I had a very detailed, and obviously things changed. Like my
Mhm.
plan has changed over the years. Like now I rent it out and I have all different kinds of avenues of income that I have. But it would be like, sit down and think about your plan, because I had to think about like, am I going to have employees? And at first, I didn't have any employees. Like, I did every freaking class, every PT session. I woke up from sun up to sundown training. So I was like, okay, well, at first, no, I'm not going to have any because I can't budget for that, right? Like, I need to
Mhm.
put every dollar into investing it. So having a solid plan, like just so you at least have a vision of like, what do I really want?
Mhm.
Because without the passion and without the real desire, I just don't see it lasting because it takes passion because it is such hard work. And so like having a solid plan, like really laying out and thinking about it, is this really what you want? Because it is going to take sacrifice. And
Mhm.
if you're like, this is my plan and this is what I want, and no one can tell me otherwise, then you're ready. Then it's time to make that leap. You're going to be scared. Like it's fucking scary. I'm a single mom. So like investing into all this rent and all the things I have is like, I don't have anyone to back me up. Like,
Mhm.
my mom does not have money and my dad is somewhere in the woods. So, like, I don't have a backup plan. I don't have support financially.
Mhm.
So, it's like, it's all in or nothing. And then my daughter has to be a part of that. So, you have to be strategic in that. But I also bartended for 3 years. Not until December 31st, New Year's Eve, was the first time I finally quit a job
Mhm.
because I had to reinvest so much because I started from nothing. I didn't have a lot of money, and no, I didn't take any loans out or anything, and they weren't giving any for fitness anyways during the
Mhm.
pandemic. So I worked for 3 years, working easily 100 hours a week, bartending Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So for 4 days, I didn't sleep, on top of managing the business, doing all the training, doing all the classes. So if you're gonna build something, I always say bartend because that's after hours
Mhm.
education. You're gonna make decent money and you can still build your business. Like it's rough, but you can still do it. So I did that for 3 years to reinvest because I thought it was more important to, like, before paying myself, to invest into the business, make it as good as I can. And then after 3 years, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So if
Mhm.
I got to live off noodles, I don't care.
I got you. So what is it that makes you so passionate about what you do?
There's so many reasons, but I think the number one reason is because I can give back and I can help people. Like for many years, all I cared about was myself and my
Mm.
using, and I destroyed people's lives. I have done some very wrong things, and like now it's like I can give people hope. And I know some people are like, it's just fitness, but you don't understand. Like people during sessions will cry to you because they lost their grandma, and then they're like, thank you. Like they just needed to vent, or
Mhm.
crying because they can fit in their wedding dress, or they're crying because now they can sit down and play with their grandkids when they couldn't do that before,
Mhm.
or they can walk in a room without falling over anymore because they had no core, no stability, or they were really sick, they were weak and they were feeble, and like now they're strong and they can do things on their own. And it's like giving back hope to people, and giving joy, and through fitness where it literally is life changing. For me, that was a big part of my sobriety. That's how I like mentally could cope with things, is like just exercise, and it's just such a mental like gain, and people don't really realize the science behind it, but it can change your whole life just exercising, like pushing yourself. to failure or where things are hard, just imagine what you're going to do in your life because you can do this in the gym, or showing up early and like going above and beyond in your workout, or showing up when you don't want to, all those things just leak into the rest of your life. So being able to like show people a better way of life and help them build like their bodies physically, mentally, I just think that's the greatest gift you can give.
So when you compare using to exercise, are
Mhm.
you trading highs? Like, are you trading an improvement in how you feel?
Yes, definitely. In some ways. In some ways it was just stopping my mind and that's all I wanted. And then there are some days where I'm like, I work out so hard where I just lay on the floor and I'm like almost like high. Like I'm like, oh my God, my brain is just turned off. But it's for the first time you can kind of do that, but there's no negative effects, right? It's not going to destroy my life. It's not
Right.
my kid. Like, I'm not, how do I say, ruining the rest of my life for it. So it's like you can get these things sober and enjoy life sober and get the same effects that you did using, but without destroying your life, you
Right.
know?
And it's a feeling, right? There's an accomplishment, there's an endorphin rush, there's all those things going on that once you put a good workout in, after you're done, you feel like you can take on anything.
Yeah,
It like
exactly.
completely resets your mind, it resets your emotions, it resets everything, right? Um, and having a hand in that and being a part of teaching people how to improve their lives, that's got to be an incredibly rewarding thing.
It is. It is. I mean, it makes it so worth it. Like the long days, long nights. Every time I see my clients and they thank me for whatever, like their body changing or feeling happier, because it does release serotonin, which is also destroyed in using, which gives you the feeling of happiness.
Mhm.
So has those benefits, but it just makes it all worth it. It's like you really are helping to change lives, just one workout at a time.
I got you. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Either email or Instagram. So email is stoneimpact21@gmail.com. Or if you want to go on Instagram, we are stoneimpact.co.
Okay. Stoneimpact.co on Instagram
Hmm.
and stoneimpact21@gmail.com is
Yes.
the best email. We'll put a link to those in your description on the podcast episode, so
Okay.
people can just click on it and go. Anything else you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, I think that's it.
Well, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. We wish you all the luck in the world with Stone Impact. I know you're going to continue to do amazing things in this world. I'm proud of you.
Oh, well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you having me and doing this for the community as well. So thank you. All
Thanks for being here.
right. Have a good one.
You too. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.